Hey everybody, welcome back to La Carnita Asada. I'm your host, George Salazar. This is episode 4 with my guest, Lyanne Alfaro. Today's episode will be sponsored by El Churro Shop, the newest restaurant on 26th Street. You can find it on 26th and Drake. So hey Lyanne, how have you been?
I've been well. How are you?
I gotta be honest, I'm pretty tired. It's been a long day. Woke up pretty late for school, so I had to zoom out the house, and then didn't get to eat anything till like right now, to be honest. And
oh my gosh,
I got weights and practice and all that.
Churros.
I know, I'm excited. They look good too. We got sauces right here too if you want.
Those look really good.
Okay, well I just want to get right into it. Yeah. So I know you went to Northside College Prep.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how CPS was back then?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, you did your research. That's a throwback. Yes, I went to Northside Prep. That's a selective enrollment school. And I would commute like 45 minutes to get to school. But that was really the case ever since I started going to elementary, which I went to elementary in Lakeview. I went to this school called Burley. It was like a language arts school.
Is that where you lived?
No, I lived in Hermosa. Oh, wow. I grew up in the northwest side of Hermosa, so west of Humboldt Park. Very different kind of neighbor, very Latino, working class. And it was through the lottery system that I got to go to this school because my first language was Spanish. And so it's interesting that you asked me about that, because I think that a lot of the reason that I do what I do and how I do it is because I realized that here in Chicago, your socioeconomic status and like the neighborhood you grew up in correlated to the like kind of education that you got.
Yeah.
And many times the quality of education that you got. And so it was through a lottery system that I got into this language arts school, and then I took a selective enrollment test, got into Northside, and that's what happened.
So was it like different from like where you grew up from? So I know you said you grew up in Hermosa. So
for sure.
Going to Northside, I'm sure it's very diverse. Was it like sort of like a culture shock when you got there?
I think because I had been doing this code switching since I went to Lakeview because I got into the lottery school, that it was a culture shock then. And that was the second grade. I didn't know a lick of English, and I go to the school in Lakeview, and they're like, we're going to teach you English. And
wait, so your first language is Spanish?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
100%.
Yeah. No, 'cause you speak really good English. I assumed, that.
No, but up to the second grade, my mom was a teacher in Mexico. And so she taught me at home. Like, she's just like, we're going to do this. Here's your libreta, like, let's read, let's write. And so it was a culture shock in second grade for sure.
That's cool. So talking about your mom or even family life, like tell me what it was like in that. Like, did you have your mom and your dad? You have any brothers and sisters? What was that like?
Yeah. So we're a nuclear family. It's me, my mom, dad, my brother, and he's 6 years younger than I am. And growing up, low income. We grew up all around Hermosa. We lived in like tight quarters with my aunts and uncles when I was like a small kid, and then eventually my dad then graduated into our own apartment. And my dad, after he left the carpentry union and he started his own business, then he was able to go up for a house. And that was a pretty big deal. But other than that, it was like it was low income until that point. But he was very like entrepreneurial in his ways. And because my mom is stay-at-home mom, definitely a lot of the reason that we landed where we did.
Yeah, I mean, hearing like with your dad, like sort of get like a late start, I sort of like can relate to that in a way.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a little village. I got brothers and sisters. And my stepdad, I have a stepdad. So like growing up, we were kind of low income. We struggled. We didn't have much. And then like just recently he started like his own tow truck business, and we're sort of like getting like nicer things and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's
That's really good to hear. So seeing that your dad was an entrepreneur, did that like inspire you, or how did that help shape you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I realized that it did. I think I thought I was more shaped by my mom, honestly, because my mom was a literature teacher. And so she taught me how to read and write, and she'd sit me down and have me read the newspaper. But it's funny because the older I grew, the more I realized like I am and like my dad in many ways is very inquieto, like very like can't sit still, is always working on a new project, and he's very entrepreneurial in his ways. So I think I definitely have some of those mannerisms of his that like help me just like pick up new skills, move fast, and then roll with the punches essentially.
So I know writing is a really big part in your life. I know you started writing at Northside for the newspaper. Mm-hmm. Were you sort of like intimidated when you started writing publicly, knowing that other people would be able to like read what you had to say?
I don't think so. I think in that elementary school I told you I went to, I got a lot of confidence from my teachers there because they taught me how to write English, and of course it was pretty bad at first, but I really fell in love with it because I really fell in love with reading. I was like kind of an introvert. I'd spend a lot of time at my local library, and yeah, I mean, I really liked how the writers I read wrote, and I really wanted to write like them. So I wrote a lot of fiction in like the 6th to the 8th grade. And so when I got to school, I'm just like, I'm already writing fiction. Like, why don't I write nonfiction? Why don't I write real stories? And so that's what it was that really got me into writing in high school. And so I wrote for the high school paper, but I also ended up writing for another youth paper in the city too.
So is that sort of like, what kind of books were you into growing up?
Like sci-fi.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I started
Yeah.
I just started reading a lot more. So I like mystery books. I don't know.
Mystery. You have a favorite author?
Was it James Patterson? Is that
Okay.
the name? I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
just
know all the
started reading
mystery.
it. I got to be honest, like, you know.
When I went down like the whole mystery rabbit hole, my favorite author was Agatha Christie. She's the one who wrote like And Then There Were None, Oriental Express, like these kind of like murder mysteries.
Yeah,
Where, like
yeah.
one person, and a lot of them have been turned into movies now. But she's a really great writer. Mysteries are dope.
I'm sort of the same way. I can't like, I'm not very good with numbers or like math, but like I love writing. You know, something about writing is like being able to express yourself on paper is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So when did you realize like, hey, this is what I want to do with my life? Like writing is what I want to pursue.
I think I just kept doing it, and I really liked it. And then when I saw it was like a viable career opportunity, I was like, why wouldn't I go through with this? It was never like, it never felt like a leap because I was always doing it. Like I was consistently uncomfortable, and I kept doing it. And, you know, like, am I the best writer? No. But I think I got comfortable with not being the best in the room and just being like the person who keeps trying. And I think that that's really what eventually made me like whatever it is that I do now, whatever my career is. It's just you keep doing it until one day you wake up and you're like, oh, this is what I do.
So before we get into like what you do now, which we are going to get into, I want to sort of talk about like young Lyanne. So we talked a little bit about Northside and you riding there. I just want to know if you were into like any sports, if you partied or stuff like that.
I wish I was cool enough to say I did
introvert?
sports, but no, I was I feel like in elementary, I was absolutely an introvert. Like, if anything, I made friends with like the people at the library. Like, I was a big nerd.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even joking. Like, I got most dramatically changed in high school, and that's because I was a big nerd. I really didn't care. And it's funny because at Northside, everybody's like
He's a big nerd.
A nerd.
Yeah.
So it's like it wasn't cliquey. I did appreciate that about high school. Like it's like everyone was like a floater. Everybody did all the things. I tried out singing for a while because my dad was a musician when he was in his 20s, and he's like, you know, you probably have the genes. You'd be really good at it. I did some singing. Didn't love it. Like, I enjoy it, but like I enjoy karaoke. That's not like something I wanted to do it for a profession. And then I think I tried my hand at fashion. I wanted to do fashion writing for a hot second. I did some entertainment writing. That was fun. But I don't know. I think I ended up finding value in other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm sort of like, I don't know. I don't like to call myself an introvert because like, I don't want to sound cocky, but like a lot of people know me at school because I'm like, you know, captain of the baseball team, and you know, I like to play ball. But I really like to like keep to myself and, you know, just sort of stay under the radar. So I feel you in a way. But I wish I was a nerd, man, because, you know, I'd be struggling, I'm telling you.
I don't know. I feel like the definition of a nerd has changed since like I was
though.
in school, and now like
Because like you watch all these movies and it's like, oh, the nerds getting bullied and picked on. But like I'm trying to make friends with nerds now, you know, do my homework, help me out. So it's definitely different. I want to talk a little bit about college. I know you went to Urbana-Champaign.
Yes.
And I'm like in the midst of like applying.
Okay.
And a lot of my friends are applying. And like, I already realized that, you know, that school's out of reach. But like a lot of my friends are like, oh, it's a super like, you know, super hard school to get into. I really want to go there. Can you tell me like what your first day on campus was like?
Yeah, that was a culture shock. Oh my God. Yeah. It's like being on a college campus is just so different. And it's so interesting because I talked with my brother about this all the time. He goes to UIC.
Okay.
And so very different experience. And I'm just like, I'm not sure that I can relate. I'm like, I really appreciate hearing what that it's like for you. But being at U of I in a college campus, it's like literally to the left and right of U of I is like corn and soy. Like, it's just like cornfields. And it's just, it was very weird to be dropped off. I'll tell you a little bit of like a weird experience. My parents actually didn't come to see me in college until I graduated. And I think it was a little bit of like they didn't want to accept that I had left home. they never stopped me. They never were like, don't go.
Yeah.
But they were never like, go. And
Yeah.
they never came. So those were two context clues that told me I was just like, okay, my parents are not like totally comfortable with me having left home to go to school, even though they're like, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
It felt really weird. I got dropped off by a former boyfriend on college campus. He like helped me move in, and then I was staying. Honestly, what helped was that I was in the dorm with two of my high school friends.
Okay.
Like that was my new family.
So would you say that it's like what helped you overcome like all those new feelings? Like I know you said it felt kind of weird.
It was new feelings for sure. I was like, oh, this is like new chapter.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to have to get it together. And like, there's some skills that I haven't practiced that I'm going to have to practice. And luckily that first year was in the dorm. But after the first year, they were like, okay, now you can rent. And I was like, what? Rent? Like, what does that even mean? Oh my God. The first time I rented, I ended up in an apartment infested with bed bugs. It literally, it's so triggering. So triggering to this day. But it's just like, you're dropped off in the middle of a campus and there's all these skills you need to learn that nobody tells you about, like financial aid, renting a home, getting food to feed yourself, like all this stuff. And so you realize you really have to you have to drop that embarrassing, like I'm embarrassed to ask part of you, and you just have to like ask all the questions and just be lost and confused openly.
Well, wait, so when you went to Urbana, did you go there like on a scholarship or what was that like?
So it was partially funded by financial aid and partially subsidized loans. So subsidized loans meaning that the government was able to reduce the interest rate on those. And so most of what I had to pay back was the actual loan itself instead of like interest rates, which you get with unsubsidized loans.
So when it came to like paying rent or like buying groceries, did you have to get a job or something?
I did, yeah.
What did you do?
I had the loans, which helped me pay part of that rent. My job alone wouldn't have, but I also worked part-time, and I was really set on doing something that actually was in my career. Like I've never worked retail. The job that I've had that probably was the least aligned with what I do that I still think helped me was daycare. But on campus, I worked in the engineering department and I wrote for their mechanical engineering magazine.
Damn.
I didn't know smack about engineering, but like I think I'd gotten so uncomfortable with being in spaces where I didn't know anything that I was like, I can learn it.
Yeah.
I can ask questions. I got so comfortable with being uncomfortable and being the person who knew the least in the room and behaving that way. And that actually helped me, I think, get ahead because I was always asking questions and I dropped my ego to ask the questions. I realized I'm like, okay, if I stay here quiet, like closed mouth's not going to get fed.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to have to ask to figure out like where I want to work, how it's going to align, what's the best apartments, scholarship situation, etc.
Yeah, like you saying, like it's sort of like clicking for me right now. Like I'm sort of like that way. Like I keep my mouth closed. I won't ask for help. I sort of just struggle on my own and be like, no, I can figure it out. I can figure it out.
Yeah, a lot of us do until you realize like
you need the help. Yeah, it's
I
like
need help.
like you're afraid to take help, sort of in a way. So Lyanne in college, was that the same Lyanne in high school? Were you like very to yourself? Did you go out?
No, I was very different.
Really?
I think college was like an opportunity because I was away from my parents and because I was like in a new environment. It was
It's a big party school, right?
It was the top party school when I went. So that was the state of affairs of Urbana-Champaign. And I think it was an opportunity. A lot of my friends saw it this way too, because a lot of my high school friends did go to that school too. Saw it as an opportunity to like reinvent yourself. And I don't know that that's exactly what I told myself, but that is what I did. Like I tried new stuff, like I considered joining a sorority, which I never thought that I would. I didn't end up doing it because I was doing so much other stuff, which like was giving me so much value to my life. But I got to really explore what a different side of me would look like.
So you said your parents didn't come see you until your senior year, correct? Yeah. So how did it feel to like graduate and, finally be like, I did it,
Yeah, it felt really good. Like it felt really like a big milestone. I think I knew I was going to get there because I was just like, I've gotten here so far. Like, and I know I have the emotional support of my parents, even though they're not here. And I'm like, had to work through that. But I think I was just like, wow, I can see like it was a big deal for my parents to show up. I know it's not far, but I think psychologically for them, like them showing up, that meant a lot. Like it meant that they like recognized oh, this is happening, and oh, she might pick up and leave again, which I did.
Yeah.
But I think that there was like a moment of just like, oh, like this is real. Like this is not just like some sort of pipe dream. And that felt pretty cathartic. Yeah.
It's sort of the same way for me. You dream about those moments of like accomplishing what you had set in your mind, right? And just making your parents proud.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
hearing.
that
I
too.
mean, it sounds like kind of corny, but hearing, I'm proud of you, Miko, it goes a long way, and it means a lot.
Way, yeah.
So you finally graduate and you kick off your journalism career. So I can imagine like those newsrooms, like they're very diverse. Was it the same thing there? Like, did you find yourself having like imposter syndrome in a way, like where you weren't able to relate to others, like the same?
Yeah. So with journalism, I honestly didn't even know what I was going to do. So I knew that journalism was a tough industry to go into. And so, oh yeah, let's go in. Let's go in. I knew that journalism was a tough industry to go into. So I had worked as many internships that I could and also explored other career options. Wow. There were quite a few of my friends who were engineers, quite a few of my friends who were in business. So before graduating, I did this really silly thing. Again, explore different parts of myself. I applied to this group at school that only the MBA kids would apply to, the kids that are getting their like master's of business degree. It was called Illinois Business Consulting, and they have a 30% acceptance rate.
Shit.
You apply, and if you get in, you get to consult at the level of the top 5. So that's Deloitte, like Bain and Company, like the top 5 consulting firms at that level. And you work with like different clients and you consult with them, and it prepares you for that kind of career. I was like, listen, if I absolutely fail at journalism, it's too late to go and get a finance degree. I'm about to graduate, but you know what? At the very least, I'm going to get these skills under my belt so I can market myself as a consultant, because you know how much those people make? Those people make 6 figures a year.
Wait, what does a consultant do?
So a consultant will work with different companies to assess a problem that they have.
Okay.
And then they'll do research to make recommendations.
And that's it.
That's what they do. It's their job to be experts in things that they're not expert in. They do the research and they make recommendations, and then they become experts that way. And I was like, wow, my job is actually that. Like as a journalist, like I covered so many things that I'm not an expert in. I ask the right questions, I get the answers.
Yeah.
So I was like, why can't I do this? So I applied and I got in. So as I was graduating, I was not only applying to journalism jobs, I was applying to consulting gigs too, because I was like, if I fail at journalism, I need to have a backup job. And I was freaking out the month before I graduated because the only viable news job that I had handed to me that wasn't an internship was a job in Idaho as an agriculture reporter. I was like, am I going to go report on potatoes? Is this really what's going to happen after I graduate? I was really nervous. I was like concerned. And so I was like, I need to have a backup. And so that was consulting for me. But a month before I graduate, I get a call from the New York Times. Sure. And I had applied to a fellowship with them on a whim. It's not even a fellowship, it's shorter. It was a 1-month stint in Arizona to report by the border with a bunch of New York Times reporters. I get a call. They say, we're interested in you and your application. Can you get on a call? And that changed the trajectory of my life forever, because once I mentioned that to some folks that I knew loosely out in New York and I begged them to give me a fellowship at Business Insider, they did. I literally begged. I called them multiple times. I wouldn't say beg, but I called them multiple times. And that's how it happened. Like, it's crazy because I realized that nothing for a very long time, nothing was ever like a given. Yeah. Like I could still totally like not make it.
Yeah, I feel you.
Quote unquote.
So you go to New York and you work for NASDAQ.
Yeah. Well, I worked for Business Insider before. I was at a fellowship at Business Insider. Yeah.
So before you leave, did you find yourself like contemplating like you wanted to stay, or you knew for sure you wanted to go? Was it like a tough decision that you had to make?
I think I knew. I think I was
you weren't like scared or anything?
Well, I was like, I already left home. Like, I didn't see my parents until I graduated. Like, I was like, that's not true, because I would come back to Chicago. You know, I had this loan money, which I used, like subsidized loans, some of it which I used to pay for tickets to come to Chicago. So I'm just like, listen, like, if I'm going to try this for real, if the New York Times called me, I'd be damned if I don't go to New York and try my chops and see if I'm any good. So I was like, let me just go. Like, of course I was in the red. I was in the red with funds. I didn't have health insurance at the time. And Business Insider wasn't offering health insurance because it was a 6-month fellowship. It wasn't a full-time gig. So I was like, I'm never going to have like the least to risk in my life. Like I have nothing to lose. I have the least amount of risk. From here on out, I actually start building a life. I start, getting more risks.
Yeah.
This is the least risk I'll have to deal with in my life. And I have little to lose because I'm in the red. So I went. Yeah.
So you're in New York. You talked about growing up Hermosa earlier. While you were in New York, what are some differences or like similarities you can say that you've seen in the Latino community here and over there, if there are any?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the Mexican community you feel it, like I think that that thing about Chicago is very present. The Mexican and the Puerto Rican community are very present here. The Mexican and Puerto Rican, especially Puerto Rican community, very present over there in New York. But it is very different in the sense that New York is very worldly. You get a lot of people that bring their unique take of Latinidad. It's so much more diverse. So much I didn't know about Latinos, about how differently their political alignments are, their socioeconomic status, where they come from. So that creates like so much more diversity, even within the Latino community.
So you come back to Chicago and, you get a job at Google, one of the top 5 companies in the world. Being back in Chicago, did you feel like sort of out of place? Did you feel like this is where you belonged? Or did you feel like, because I know New York is a lot bigger, or did you feel like you were like back in a small pond?
No, I wouldn't say a small pond. I think I've only been here for a year, so I would say I'm still adjusting. Like I definitely think I'm more adjusted than I was a year ago. But I think with Google, when I got that job, they said, "Do you want to stay in New York?" That was the job. I wanted to come back to Chicago. Yeah. I think it was. I think the pandemic was like a time to like be like, "Hey, what is it that you want in life right now?" And I was like, I still want to pursue all my career endeavors, but New York's always going to be there. I want to be back in Chicago with my family. I want to do some financial things, some financial moves myself. So I decided to come back.
That's good. That's something I take a lot of pride into. I love where I'm from, and we have our struggles as a community, but I sort of look at my community like a family, right? And with every family, you're gonna have problems, especially us Mexicans. We're crazy. So when I dream about becoming successful and sort of not leaving this behind, like, oh, Little Village was where I grew up. Like I want to stay here and be a part of that change. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
So before we get into our last topic, I read an interview about how you were like pitching stories about people of color. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, why did you do that? Why did you feel the need to have to pitch stories about people of color?
Yeah. So in New York, I was out there for 7 years. I fell into business news journalism. And so I worked at Business Insider, CNBC, and then, as you mentioned, NASDAQ. And it was actually not very diverse. And a lot of the leadership was white and male. And so one of the things that I saw missing from coverage was just BIPOC people. And I was very surprised by that because, coming from Chicago, the hustle is people of color. Like, like all these entrepreneurs, small business owners, like people who launch things, they're people of color. And especially Latinos, who I felt like I knew the best because I grew up around them, and my dad being one of these business owners. So I found it very jarring that there wasn't coverage on people. Like it just literally, we'd have Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos on rotation. I was like, I think we can do more. We can do better. So I started pitching these stories. It wasn't getting an amazing acceptance rate at first because people wanted like big numbers. Yeah. But the thing is, our founders, like people of color founders, don't often get access to bank loans for many reasons. But one of them being credit scores, which is tied to all these systemic issues. And then we also don't get a lot of funding for our company. So I'm just like, how are you going to expect these people to have big numbers if you're not even confiding in them, giving them the literal loans and assets that they need in order to grow? So I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to start my own thing too on the side where I started my podcast and newsletter, Moneda Moves. And that's how I started doing that. But now I continue to write it because I think it's really important to write these stories. It really makes a difference in what people perceive as reality. Yeah.
So Moneda Moves, I want to talk about that. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? Like, what does it consist of? What kind of guests you like to have on there? What do you talk about? And I wanted to talk about where you got the name from, like how you came up with it.
Sure. So the name came from, I launched the newsletter around the time I Like It by Cardi B was trending. So, you know, she had her whole album. She's like, I make money moves. I'm like, I love that. I love that. And you know what? I love my Spanglish too. So I was like, okay, Moneda Moves, bet. I'm like, I'm going to get this trademarked. And last year I finally did get it trademarked. It took me years, but I finally did. And it was available. So I did that. That is a platform that's all about Latinos, money, and our contributions to the American economy. As I've continued doing it, I realized that I focus a lot and there's a big need for like first movers in particular, because Latinos, again, are very diverse, different socioeconomic status. And so like, it's one thing to say this person, you know, came from a family that is an oil company family or a family that was a magnate, and now they're following in their footsteps and doing entrepreneurship. That's not a discredit to them. That's still amazing. But I think that there's a lot of relatability for a lot of people over like, hey, we were in the come up. We didn't have anything growing up. Yeah. And this person did not have a blueprint. Now they need to come up with the blueprint. There's so many people to be served through these kind of stories, and just lessons to be learned as to how to navigate a world that no one tells you how to navigate unless you're already born into like an ecosystem and like a community that teaches you how to do it. So a lot of it is interviews with fintech people, people who are prominent in the business space, and founders that are navigating for the first time being successful in the business world. And I focus on Latinos.
So it's strictly Latinos?
I work with a lot of BIPOC people too, because we face a lot of the same issues, you know, like Asian sons and daughters of Asian people, Asian immigrants, like Black people. We face a lot of the same issues because we face all these systemic issues. And so I do have people from other cultures on.
You saying that, like, I realize sometimes I feel like society like tries to split us apart or like separate like different types of minority classes. I feel like it's more about like coming together and, you know, realizing that we all sort of face the same oppression, and it's better to be united rather than separated, you know.
100%.
So I mean, growing up, I heard, you know, trying to talk about money with my mom and dad. I'll be like, hey, you know, can we afford this? Can I get this? Can I get that? It's a lot of like mom and dad be like, oh, don't worry about it, or, you know, we got it, or like talking about money is like, it's like taboo in a way, or it's like forbidden. Like the Latinos don't talk about their money. Was that sort of the same situation you had in your household?
Yeah, it's interesting because my parents talked about money, and then again, they didn't talk about money. I think they talked about whatever money stories or money narratives they knew and they felt comfortable repeating. But there's like divots where, like, now that I've come back as an adult and I know more things than I did, and I bring them up, I realize it makes us deeply uncomfortable. And so they're very emotional conversations. So we would talk about, like, my mom, she would talk about how the limones were cheap at the other Cermac versus the Jimenez, you know, like those were money conversations that we had. My dad would talk about how, like, he could charge like $1,000 easy for this project in construction at a home. But what they didn't feel comfortable talking about, and I learned this as an adult, is like, hey, mom, dad, have we drafted up a will? Like, you know, like what's going to happen to the houses if something happens? Because it's terrible things to talk about, but it's all things that are necessary for preparation. And if you look at families who have more accumulated wealth, these are conversations that are happening openly and freely. And it takes some tension off of the off of circumstances later when people are older. It's all part of wealth planning, right? So these bigger conversations, and honestly very emotional, intense conversations, are very difficult for us to have even now. And so I realized that we were having certain money conversations, but now we need to have like bigger money conversation.
I can relate to that in a lot of ways. So my parents, you know, they're getting older, and they sort of have these talks about they just bought a house right here on 31st and Drake.
Congrats.
So they're going to renovate it, you know, rent it out.
Yeah.
And we're having this conversation today, like, hey, if something happens to me and your dad, you know, it's going to be yours and then your brother's. And it's a hard conversation to have because you don't want to like imagine your parents not being here. Yeah. But I see what you say about like it's necessary that we have to have those conversations so we can know what to do, like if that situation would ever happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't jump like straight into it. I don't plunge straight into it because these are emotional conversations. So usually when we're having these conversations, you know, I'll have my parents over for dinner. We'll talk about something else, like not about that. And then we'll make our way into it because these are really emotional conversations. And at the end of the day, you're dealing with people. At the other end of the money line, you're dealing with a person, especially when it's your family. You want to be really sensitive about the topics and sensitive to their feelings because a lot of the psychology feeds into how you treat the money too.
So as a young person, I think a lot about money. I think about money, every day. Mainly about how to, get it. I'm
Yeah.
always asking, Ray and Ernesto, like, is there opportunities for me to make money or stuff like that. It can be pretty stressful, especially when I'm going to college and, I'm starting life in a way. I'm already 17 years old, but I'm in those stepping stones of becoming my own adult and managing my own funds. Is there any advice you can give out to other kids who are in my situation? Because I know there's a lot out there.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of money, I would say don't ignore your credit score. As a matter of fact, if you can find out what your credit score is, do it. And there's a couple of ways to do that. There's a few services online that you can do it for free. I would say we sometimes talk about in our community about credit as a bad thing because we tend to talk about credit card debt.
Yeah.
But credit is super important to build. And the soonest you can build it, the better. The way to establish a healthy relationship with credit is to treat your credit cards like a rotating door. Like nothing ever that you're taking out of your credit card or like paying for with your credit card should be nothing that you don't have in your bank account. You should always be like, I'm going to immediately pay it, or like it's scheduled to be paid and I know I have that money in my bank account. And that will help you. That's one great way that's going to help you build your credit score. The other thing I would say is now there's a couple of apps. There's a couple of financial technology companies and apps that will help you use, like the first time you get your own apartment and pay rent, you can use that to build credit as well. Why is credit so important? Because when you get older, you're going to want to make bigger investments, maybe on buying a home. And to buy a home or to start a business, you're going to want a loan from the bank. When you go to get a loan from the bank, they're going to check your credit score. And how good your interest rates are, whether or not you get the loan is going to depend on that credit score. So I would say that I neglected my credit score for probably longer than I should have because I was fearful of going into credit card debt. But the matter of fact is, I would recommend that you go to NerdWallet or Credit Karma, one of these sites. They all have really good resources on building credit and to build it little by little. I'm not suggesting that you go ham on a shopping spree in your credit card. Please do not do that. But literally get a credit card that has some good perks for things you use already. Like, hey, I shop at this grocery store. This credit card is giving me benefits on this grocery store. Like, you can get some perks from that. You can start building your credit because later you're going to be able to benefit from it so much.
I had this conversation actually just last week with Ernesto and my brother. We were talking about, building credit, and he was like giving me this advice like, hey, as soon as you turn 18, we'll figure out a nice credit card for you to know that we can sign up for.
Yeah.
And then you sort of just spend money on that. And like you said, that money in the bank that you have, like you sort of immediately pay it off.
Blocks. We want to make sure we are very cognizant of how we are using our debt. And in a careful way too, because it affects our credit score and we're just getting started.
Talking about money, like Latinos, I mean, growing up, I know I wasn't my parents didn't know much about like what you're talking about, building right credit. My mom was just sort of just like, oh, work a job and save your money. That's all we're pretty much taught.
That's what I got too.
I feel like it's like that's a standard for most Latino like youth. Mm-hmm. Like we're not really taught how to like invest properly or stuff like that. So I know your podcast Moneda Moves talks about that a lot. What does it mean to you be able to teach like the youth out there about money moves and sort of just creating generational wealth?
Yeah, I gotta say, so I do tell a lot of stories about money, and I ask experts to share their expertise. I don't consider myself a financial literacy teacher because I'm still learning. Like I will talk about what I know and my journey because I think there's value in that. Yeah. But I think there's so many amazing financial literacy teachers out there. I mean, among them, you have in the community Pablo Torres, who I met just last year, who's over. I know he's at Northwestern Mutual and also giving like a lot of wealth talks in the community of La Villita and Pilsen. What the podcast aims to do is share stories and raise visibility over people who are doing it first time, just like us. And so they may teach us things, sure, about finance, but also about side hustles, about building your company for the first time and navigating that ecosystem.
So lastly, before we wrap up, I just want to like ask if there's anything you want to leave our guests with, any special projects you're working on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone can follow at Moneda Moves or follow me at Lyanne Alfaro. In terms of special projects, we'll be ramping the podcast back up in February. So we're really excited to share new releases and hopefully some live podcasting events later this year.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been real. Lyanne Alfaro. This is George Salazar signing off. I'll see you guys next time.